to James Carter and his beautiful partner Beatrice, who's going to regale you with the stories of how he started out in photography. And so, in the words of Michael Caine, get Carter.
Oh, thank you.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks very much, Christine, for the introduction. Very kind of you. There'll be no Michael Caine impression, maybe later on. So first of all, I'd just like to thank you, and say a big thank you for inviting me this evening to talk to you about my photography business, how I started it, the journey that it took, some of the things that have happened, and where we are now. I'd like to thank in particular Norman, because he asked me down here, and he did actually say, he said, James, he said, if you come down here, there'll be a drink in it for you. I didn't realise that drink would be a cup of tea though, Norman. So my life as a photographer, and how it actually started right from the start to where we are now. I'll try and keep turning around so I don't have my back to anybody. And can everybody see the screen before we start? If not, just want to move out a little bit further, we'll be able to see it. So originally, I started in finance, nothing to do with photography. Left school at 16, didn't know really what I wanted to do, and went working for a bank in London, in the city of London, and I was actually working in foreign exchange. And it was in the 1980s, and everybody said, James, you're in the right place, because this is where the money is, and it's the place to be. But I was the original square peg in the round hole. I didn't enjoy what I did, and it was a drag really going to work. So I actually had a picture taken of me at that time when I was working up in the city, and I'll show you the picture. This is me then, not a grey hair inside, but as you can see, very solemn. So I was the square peg in the round hole. I wasn't very happy. And I knew there was something else and a different career that I was looking for. So luckily, when I was around 22 years old, I met a good friend that used to do wedding photography on a Saturday. And I said to him, I'd be very interested if you could get me an interview and if I could go and see the studio to try and do the same as what you do. And luckily he did. He got me an interview at a place in Epping. It was called National Weddings. And at that time, they was photographing about 5,000 weddings a year. Well, anyway, at the interview, I went to see the actual manager, and he said to me, what camera do you use? And I said, well, I've got an Olympus Trip. Hands up who remembers the Olympus Trip camera. Yeah, very good.
I probably still got it.
So he wasn't over impressed with that. But I thought, well, if it's good enough for David Bailey, it's good enough for me. And you may remember, we've got a clip here, we go on to this, of David Bailey on the advert.
I've got a smile, everybody, please, smile. Waste of time. You haven't taken a light reading. That's all right. It's completely automatic. It works out the light. You just pick the shutter. Ah, it's okay for snacks, but just you try hard. See, the trouble with these small cameras is the lens. No problem. There's a Seiko lens. They use it on the Olympus OM1, one of the best cameras in the world. Well, I said all right for you boys. Well, you wouldn't get a professional using one. You know who that is? David Bailey.
The Olympus Trip, so simple, anyone can use it.
So, bringing back a few memories there of David Bailey. So, the other thing that was asked for me in the interview is, James, where's your work? Can you show me some of your pictures that you've taken? And I said, well, actually, I haven't got anything. So he said, you've got an Olympus Trip camera, and you haven't got no work to show me, but you want me to take you on as a photographer? I said, correct. He said, well, it was a bit of a don't call us, we'll call you. And he said, James, what you need to do is go out and buy a professional roll film camera, a German Metz flash gun and a light meter. He said, go and do this, go and take some pictures of your family and friends. And he said, when you've done that, come back and give me a call. So within 2 weeks, I'd gone out and bought the camera, the roll film camera. I bought the light meter, bought the flash gun. I took pictures of the family. I went to St Andrew's Church. I took some pictures inside there. and I was back on the phone, and I said, Eddie, I said, you saw me 2 weeks ago, I've done exactly what you asked, when can I see you? And he was quite surprised. He said, come in this Saturday. And I said to him, this is what I've done. And I laid everything out on the table. And he said, well, I must say, James, he said, you've got some nice stuff there. He said, what I'll do is, I'll have you out next week, training with another photographer. I don't want you to say anything, but I just want you to stand by him and take pictures with him by your side. So I thought to myself, this is what I want to do. And I felt a lot happier. And I kept my job in the city. But I knew I wanted to carry on with the wedding photography, and I went out training that day, and the next week they sent me out training again, and the week after that I was actually going and doing my own photography for them at a reception. A couple of weeks after that they pushed me in the deep end and went and did my first wedding, which is quite nerve-wracking, but they actually told you at the studio, they're very good with PR, they told you what to say, and they said when you go into the bride's house, don't tell the bride it's your first wedding. He said, just say you've had a good couple of weeks the last couple of weeks. He said, they don't know where you're thinking about going on holiday or anything. So I just walked in the bride's house and I said, hello there, I said I've had a good couple of weeks the last couple of weeks. And I just followed what they've said, and that was it. And then after that, I had another picture taken of me as a photographer, and as you can see, a lot happier, with some money in the end. So after 2 years of working for the studio, that's an unlucky groom by the way, teeing off. After 2 years, I then branched off and I thought, you know what, I'll start doing wedding photography for myself and try and start this as a business and to get it going. And I still kept my job up the city, but I set myself a target of the first year doing 10 weddings. And there was quite a lot of girls that worked in the city, in the bank where I was. And when I'd done the first few weddings, I was passing these around and showing them to other people. The second year I thought I'm going to build this up and I'm going to try and double this and get it up to 20 weddings. So naturally progressing and going on. Year 3 I went up to 30. I was doing a lot of hours. I was travelling about 1.5 hours to get to work in the morning, so 60 hours a month. We was doing 30 weddings, some full-time photographers. This is what they was doing without another job, but I kept pushing it. My dad was around at the time and he was always a driving force for me. And I said, Dad, I said, I'm getting up to 30 weddings. He said, that's nothing. He said, you want to get it up to 80 something, you know, and he was a real driver. So anyway, year 4, I managed to get it up to 46 weddings. And all this with a full-time job. But something had to go. So in the end, I let the job in the city, I let that go, and then I went full-time with the photography. Now, obviously over that time I did about 500 weddings over 15 years, and many things happened, and obviously there's the odd story that occurs and the odd funny that occurs, but one that stuck in mind and I'll share with you tonight is actually by the register. Now, after the ceremony, the bride and groom obviously sign the register, and there's always a photo opportunity, and you go in to photograph the bride and groom with the register. Now, on this occasion, it was slightly different because the bride and groom signed the register, and as is normal, the vicar said, can we have the 2 witnesses, please? And the bride said, well, we're going to have the 2 dads. He said, that's fine. He said, well, could the groom's dad come forward, please, and sign the register? So with that, he pulled the pen, and he started signing the register, and he did that. And then he said, can we now have the bride's father, could you now witness the register? And he walked over and he's signing his name. As he's signing his name, he says, Vicar, he says, the pen's running out. He said, but don't worry about that, he says, just put your weight on it. So he put Albert Smith, 11 stone, 7 pounds. True story. So, moving on, I then went to a lot of seminars, I met a lot of other photographers, and I met a lot of photographers that were doing some weddings, and some weren't doing any weddings at all, but they were doing a lot of portraits. So they were shooting family portraits, and they were doing very well. And a lot of photographers said to me, James, you know, weddings are okay, but if you want to do well, and you want to earn more, he said, do portraiture. Because pound for pound, an hour for an hour, you'll do better at this. Now, I didn't have a studio, so I had nowhere to actually take the pictures. So what I did was I went to people's homes, and it was difficult because sometimes I might go around to a house and they'd said, James, we want a group of 6 people. We've got a 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, and we've got the cat and the dog. Can you get it all in the picture? You walk into the living room, it'd be wall-to-wall furniture, there'd be a 3-piece settee, a fish tank, the television, nowhere to move. But anyway, I struggled through, and then the next week I'd take a projector, an older version of this, and actually show the pictures over the fireplace. I got Dad to hold the projector for me. Mum would sit on the settee and I'd put the frames around the pictures, and it would sell the wall portraits. Now, as I say, sometimes I'll even be up in tower blocks, so I'll be trying to hold the lift door open while I'm trying to get the camera in and the rest of the props. It was a difficult time, but it was a good start for me, and fond memories. I even kept the vehicle, a picture of the vehicle that I used at the time. I've still got it, and it's available for hire if you're interested as well. So moving on, I thought to myself, what I need to do is I need to find a place to work from. I can't keep going around people's houses. And I looked around in Hornchurch. I've always lived in Hornchurch, and it was too expensive really. Most of the shops to try and rent, and buying was out of the question. So I looked around and I thought to myself, if I could just rent an office and maybe convert the office into a studio, that could be a start. So Charlie's Pet Shop, which you may recall was by White Hart, as we all know it, and over the top of Charlie's there was some offices, and there was an office there for rent, and the guy wanted £70. I said, what's the best you can do? He said, we'll do it for £60 a week. And it was a small room, just 16 foot by 10, and I used to shoot up one end, that was the background, and at the other end would be a screen, and we'd project the images onto the wall. Now, a lot of people said to me, James, it's not going to work because you've got a staircase at the side, you've got an alleyway, a staircase, people aren't going to find it very easily, parking's not great. But I said, you know what, I'll make this work. And I was driven in my mind to make it work. And I did. I managed to get up to a £50,000 turnover, and it was tough going. I did have a little bit of a catchphrase. I said to people, if you want to watch the birdie, you're going to have to go downstairs. Pet shop, keep up there. But it worked. And then what I did, I rented a second room within the building. That was another £50 a month. And then I rented a third room. And then eventually I was paying around £550 a month in rent. And I said to my accountant, look, I need to buy a freehold, because if I stay renting these offices as a studio, I'm going to be here, say, 10 years, I'm going to give the landlord £60,000, I'm going to walk away, and I'm going to have nothing. And my accountant said, James, he said, there's no way you can afford to buy a freehold property. He said, you won't be able to afford to do it, you won't be able to afford to deposit, and he said, if you do it, you're going to have a cash flow problem. So I listened to my accountant very carefully. I didn't take a blind bit of notice of what he said, and I went out and bought a freehold shop. Now this is in Woodall Parade, which I think most of you know where it is in Windletire Lane. It's a sleepy parade really, it's a secondary parade, but it's ideal for what I'm doing because you've got a good car park to the side. And this shop actually didn't go on the open market. The chap used to sell frames and trophies, and a friend of mine said that it's coming up for sale, and I managed to pick this up for £75,000. But even then, 13 years ago, it was a good buy obviously, but it was a lot of problems. The roof had dropped, it had rising damp, the windows were rotten, it went on and on. But I had a good friend who was a builder, and myself and the builder designed how we wanted the studio, and it had a staircase. You can just see the stairs where they used to go. We managed to take all of those out. We made the flat self-contained, and then it's a 2-bedroom flat which we rented out, and that helped to pay for downstairs. The rest of the building was completely gutted. It needed everything taken out, so it was a really difficult and a hard time because any money that I was earning went straight to the builder. But we persevered with it and we went on, and that's the studio as we are now. So a long journey to get everything straight from renting the actual room over the pet shop. And what we've got now is a reception area where people just wait before their pictures are taken, and also wait before they come back to view the pictures. We've got the studio, which effectively is a white box, but we bring in all different fabrics and different backgrounds to create different sort of images. And finally, a viewing room, and this is the room where people come back and view the pictures with a projector up on the screen. So 3 main rooms, and out the back of the offices that go with it. So when all the building work was done, what I did was set myself a target to build up 100,000 turnover in the first year, 200 the second year, 300 the third year, and 400 the fourth. Pretty much the same how I was building up the number of weddings. But mine is not saying here, and I tell other photographers, I'm not saying this just to brag, I'm saying anybody can do this if you've got the drive to do it, because I'm not highly qualified. I left with a couple of O-levels. I think I've got a grade 1 in CSE in technical drawing, which is great if you want to draw triangles, but not a lot else. And I decided I need to get some qualifications, maybe I need some degrees. So I actually did. I did get 3 degrees. I've got them on a CD and I play them in the car regularly. I'm a friend of Norman, what do you expect? The 2 words on a serious note, persistence and determination. I think with these 2 things, this is what got me through, because there was plenty of times when the accountant would say to me, like, don't buy this, you can't afford it, and sometimes you just got to take that extra risk to go on to the next rung on the ladder. And it actually led me to Buckingham Palace. So who would have thought Charlie's Pet Shop to Buckingham Palace? But what happened was I made good friends with another photographer, Charles Green, who was actually a royal photographer, and he had the contract for what's called investitures. So anybody that's knighted at Buckingham Palace, he receives an OBE, an MBE or a CBE. Charles was in charge of all the photographs. Now, he brought in another 5 photographers, so there were 6 of us in total. There's only 6 photographers doing this in the UK, and luckily I struck up a good friendship with Charles, and the 6 of us would do these events. There was about 20 to 30 events every year at Buckingham Palace, and it was a pressure job. You had 1 hour after they saw the Queen, and if the Queen wasn't actually doing the knighthoods and it was Charles, he would sometimes take an hour and a half, so you'd only have half an hour to take the pictures. It had to be perfect. You had 1 shot at it, the people were there in a long row, you had to take the pictures of the person that received the medal and also their family, and there was no room for mistakes. It was freezing cold sometimes in the courtyard out the back, but it was a great experience. And I'm known really for getting some good expressions with people when they come to the studio, and I have catchphrases, and one of them is, we'll go 1, 2, 3 and we all shout happy, 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 which gets an expression. And one of my friends said to me, James, whatever you do, he says, don't start doing the happy, happy, happy down at Buckingham Palace. He said, tone it down a bit. I said, okay then. And I had a group out there one day, and I just couldn't resist it. I said, how about we go 1, 2, 3, OBE? Big smiles. And we got away with it, but I did tone it down. So a great experience, and I learned a lot from some of the top photographers. So 28 years into the business now, we've got 15,000 customers. I was chatting to Christine just while I was having the meal, and I said, the most important thing for me really is the customers that we've met and retained over the years. And even in tough times like now, the recession times, this is what's helping me, because a lot of customers come back 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So it's sometimes the payback for the hard work that you get. But I do think it's very important, even with the stresses and the strains of the business, to keep humour. I also read years ago that if people are happy, they spend more, and if people are happy, they spend quicker as well. So I thought, let's keep it happy. And having a little bit of a laugh and joke is what we do. Now, one summer evening, I had a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children. They were booked in for a family shop. Now, this is the parade there, my shop there, and as you can see, hairdressers, fish and chip, Chinese, takeaway. And they came with the letter of confirmation, and the lady looked as white as a sheet. She was very, very nervous when she came in, and she said, oh, I've come for the pictures taken. And I said, can I see your letter of confirmation, please? And she passed me the letter, and I knew what it was because one of my girls sent it to her. And I said, I looked at it, and I said, oh yeah, I said, 8 o'clock appointment, yeah. What you need to do, I said, is come out of my shop here, walk along 3 shops, walk into the Chinese and they'll take all the pictures for you. Dead serious. She said, what do you mean? She said, it said James Carter here, and I'm in the right. No. She said, this week, and this week only, I said, we've got job swap. I said, we're cooking all the food, and the Chinese is taking all the pictures. Really? She said, yeah. Oh, okay then. So she walked out of the shop, brought her 2 kids with her and her husband with her. They walked out of mine, walked along, walked into the Chinese, at which point I thought, I better go and get her, because I said, you know what? I said, I'm only pulling your leg. She says, James, she says, I could kill you, she said. But after that, there was no nervousness. She was happy, it broke the ice. They come back, chose the pictures, had a lovely picture for the wall. So a little bit of a laugh and joke, and I think that it always helps a little bit. And there was another occasion when effectively the joke was on me, because a guy phoned me up at the studio once, a little bit of the rough and ready, a nice guy but rough and ready, and he said, can you photograph me and my bird? And I said, certainly. I said, yeah, we can do that. He said, but it's me and my bird, can you do that? I said, yes, that's what we do, we can do it, no problem. And I just thought he's bringing his girlfriend or his partner. But when he actually come to the studio, this was the bird. And he had it on his arm like this, and the thing was massive. I wasn't expecting this. So anyway, I brought him into the studio with the bird, and after I've cleaned up the floor on numerous occasions, I managed to get the shot. So really on that time, the joke was on me. But now I always check and I always ask, and I say, who's coming down? Are there any pets or animals? And what's the ages of the people? To double check, I know what's happening. So, what do we photograph? Well, effectively, it's people that we're photographing. I'm a portrait photographer, and we photograph families, and we photograph every nationality. So we have a lot of Nigerian customers, Asian customers, English customers, but a lot of nationalities from all around the world. And it's interesting because I get to know a little bit of each of the culture, and I embrace this culture, and it's good. And when we talk, we've got something that's in common. And sometimes there'll be occasions when people will get the family. We had one recently. There's some family in Hong Kong, some family in the UK, and they set a special date to get together for a big family shot of everything. And sometimes it takes a lot of arrangements. So we shoot a lot of Saturdays, but we also shoot a lot of Sundays. It's easier for a lot of people to get the times together. The other thing is families with pets, and people bring down, generally it's their dog. Sometimes it's a cat, sometimes it's a guinea pig, but generally it's the dogs. And it might be 1 or 2 dogs. This is very popular, and I have a shot like this in effectively my window, and it gets more attraction, not because of the people, but because of the Dulux dog. And a lot of people say, James, is it a real dog or is it a puppy? I said, it's a real dog. And this attracts more customers, and it really does help. Now, the other thing is just pets on their own. In this nation, dog crazy. Okay, I think one of the most nations is England and the UK, where pets are the number one thing, but dogs are definitely the number one of the pets. So we photograph a lot of dogs, and sometimes a lot of the families don't want to be with them. They just say, we'll photograph the pets on their own. Now, I had a phone call a number of years ago, and the lady said, James, I've got 6 Schnauzer puppies. They're 5 weeks old. They're like a little ball like this. I'm a dog breeder, she says. I'm going to sell the puppies in the afternoon. I want you to photograph the 6 of them. Could you do it? I said, well, I'll give it a try. Now, not easy, even if it was 1 puppy. But when you get 6 of them, it's very difficult. Well, what happened was, the owner brought the dogs down, and we tried everything. We put them in vegetable pots, we put them in flower pots, and we tried to line the 6 of them together, and it just didn't work. And we've been going for about 2.25 hours. And at which time he said, James, he said, we've tried it as hard as we can. He said, let's call it a day. And I said, no. I said, I'm never going to give up. I'm going to get this picture. So we carried on, and eventually all the 6 puppies completely fell asleep. And it was on a white paper, and I said, right, what we do is the 2 ones at the end, just turn them out slightly. And I said, I want you to stand behind me and make a barking noise, not too loud. And he did it, and he stood behind me going, woof, 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 woof. And one at a time, they kept up, right. And the second one up, third one, and when it comes to the fifth one, stood right up. And I couldn't believe me luck, because in art and photography, the point of a third is the point of the interest. And as the dog stood up, got the shot. Now that was taken on film. There was no Photoshop, there was no digital at that time. And I said to the customer, I said, we've got a really good shot there. I said, if you like, we can put this in for a competition. He said, well, if you think so. I said, yeah, let me do this. And we put it in for the Kodak of the Year award. And out of 1,800 entries, he got the first prize. So, very pleased with that. And actually, him as a customer won £1,000. So I phoned him up and said, good news. I said, do you remember the competition? He said, I forgot all about that. I said, you won £1,000. He said, let me split it with you. I said, if you must. So £1,000 a boot, 500 each. For, again, persistence and determination. We could have just given up and think, you know what, we're not going to get it. And this shot on my website, I always display the shot. This was brought me so much more working. So by working hard in the first place, I've reaped the rewards a little bit later on. We also shoot a lot of models, model portfolios, both for guys and for girls. We work with an agency in Woodford, which is Rascals Model Agency, and they work with Marks and Spencers and Next, and also with drama on the TV with EastEnders. So a lot of people are always looking to try and break into modelling, and for the girls as well as. This was actually taken on Hornchurch Station, which has got a 1930s look to it, and obviously we put that in more of a sepia tone. So we do model portfolios. We have hair and makeup artists come in as well. And babies. We have lots of babies come to the studio. And again, this shop, a lady that I did a wedding probably 20 years ago came back to me as an existing customer and said, James, I've seen something in a magazine where the father's holding out the baby. And she showed me a newspaper cutting, and it was on a white background. I said, could you do it? I said, yeah. So let's have a go. And we did it, and I did it against the black background and converted it to black and white. And it just worked well. It's a tricky shot to get, and obviously a lot of people think Dad's holding the baby up there, which is very dangerous, but there's actually pillows just under there, okay, so there's no risk of the baby tilting over. But this again has been a show picture for me. Whenever we have a show, every year we do the Havering show, and we get a lot of interest from this. And this picture has been what they call like a hot shot. And really, because the customer is asking me to do it, that's why I did it. And she was very happy for me to display the picture. So the only problem we sometimes get is, say, James, can you do the arm shot? Because whenever I exhibit this, they'll phone, can you do that shot? And I said, yeah. How old's the child? We're about 3.5 now. I said, unless Dad's very strong, no.
Oh dear.
And we take a different slant. So we'll do the standard pictures, but we'll do something a little bit more artistic as well. This is just all covered over with the material, just looking to the side. So something a little bit different. We're looking to try and get a different style. And this is something that we've done fairly recently. And my partner Beatrice is very kind, she's very artistic, and has put together a woodland setting. Now we do this about 4 times a year. Children or grandchildren of the right age, they love this. And in the studio, effectively we've got like a pond, not real water, but it gives a reflection. And we've got all the shrubbery, all the green, and we bring all the animals in, like the squirrels, and we have the toads in there as well, the butterflies. And there's about 100, I think it's 100 outfits, isn't it, Beatrice, that we've got.
For the girls and about 30 outfits.
Yeah, about 80 and for the girls and about 30 for the boys. They love it. And they can also come in with the brothers and sisters and all of the children in together. So we do this in the half term, and it really works well. As you can see, the little pond area, and effectively when the children are in there, they sort of lose themselves. And when they come in, even with the mums and dads, they go, wow, what a lovely setting. Now some photographers are doing this fairy pictures, but they're doing it against what's called a green screen. I don't know if you know a green screen, many of you, what it is. They use it really effectively like a green cloth, and then you can drop in any background. But it takes away any of the sort of mystique, and the kids can't actually visualise the background. So with this, they come in and it really works well. As you can see there, baby and a sister. And with the boys, we go for the elves. So we do elf pictures. Little cuties, like you see there. No one ever cries, the kids, much. And there's another lad that come down, he's a smashing guy, and his mum said, James, after you've done this, could you do some model shots for him? Because I really want to get him into modelling, and he really wanted to do it himself. And I was pleased to see a couple of weeks ago that he got a contract with an agency, and it's going to be a billboard. So from coming initially from these pictures, and I said to the lady, I said to the mum, this boy is really good, because everything I'm asking him to do, he's got it off pat. We come back, we did some model shots, he went to an agency, and I'm pleased to say he's now got a contract, he's got an equity card, and he's due to go on a billboard advertisement. Just really for coming down for some elf pictures. So photography, still very powerful. We do something also called the Young Model of the Year, and this is something that I did, and I've been doing for many years now, again in conjunction with Rascals. It's from 0 to 17, there's 4 age groups, and the children come down, we do 6 different looks, like a portfolio shot. They come back to choose the picture. If they want to buy any pictures they can, without obligation, but they choose a picture that's judged by Rascals Model Agency. They then have a year's contract with the agency, and also there's a cash prize as well. So this is another, if you like, string to the bow. And then makeovers. We do a lot of makeover pictures. Now we have a makeup artist that comes in. She'll do the hair and makeup for about an hour, and then we do the shoot in the studio for about 1 hour, as you see there. Now we've got a shot here also. This was an after makeover. And sometimes we take a before shot as well, so you can see the comparison. So this is you see after the makeover, and this was before. So we can make a really good transformation. We have to take the beer out there, there's none of that. Now celebrities, we do photograph, or I photograph, quite a number of celebrities. You may recall this guy, Billy Murray. Always played the villain. He was in EastEnders, The Bill, even going back many years in The Sweeney, if you remember that. And what I do with a lot of celebrity photographs is effectively, I don't charge to take the pictures, and what we do is we work with charities, and we do a lot of work with St Francis Hospice, also Little Havens Hospice as well in Southend. And what we do is photograph the celebs. So sometimes they'll be at the studio, but generally I will go out to photograph them wherever they are. And once they've okayed the picture, they will sign it. I will then get it mounted and framed and give it back to the charity. And when there's a black tie event, they will then auction it. The charity will ask the celebrity to come as a guest, and they will auction the actual framed picture off. Sometimes if they're short of an auctioneer, I'll even go down and do it for them as well. And if the celebrity's there, we do a PR shot, him handing over the picture. Very powerful. I've got a friend in Guernsey that did this, and on one evening they raised over £2,000 just on a few celebrity pictures that were signed up, but the celebrities come back that night. So it's very powerful, and if there's links with celebrities, I'm more than happy to do that with other charities as well. Nigel Benn, who remembers the Dark Destroyer? 2 people. I was asked to go and photograph Nigel Benn at a local gym. He was opening up the gym, and we did the shots, and he did a workout, and he's quite a frightening guy. Nice bloke, but you can see it in his eyes, a frightening guy, not the guy to upset. And after the photographs were taken, he had a red boxing glove with him. I said, Nigel, I said, is there any chance of you and me having a quick shot, you and me, with the glove? And I said, I could put that up in the studio. I said, that would look great. He said, yeah, no problem. He says, we'll do that. And then the next thing that I knew, as I was leaning in, my friend was taking a picture, he grabbed across and just held my arm, but like a vice. And I looked at him, I thought, what's he doing? And I went to turn like that. He said, let's get some action shots. And he tapped, what was a tap for Nigel Benn, nearly knocked me block off, to be honest. And he tapped like that. And just as he got it, one of my friends managed to get the shot. And here we go. And I'm thinking my days are over, what's happened? And then he got the next shot where bang, he was connecting, like you see there. So anyway, he did it a couple of times, and I said to him, look, don't do it again, Nigel. I said, I don't want you to get hurt, because I said, if you upset me too much, I'm going to retaliate. Joking aside. And after that, we went down to Caff and had something to eat. And you know what, he's a really nice guy. We had some good laughs and good times. So, but yes, for the rest of the day, I had a headache, and my ear was bright red. It was red as a glove. But later on, I managed to get this shot, and this was fairly recently. You may remember the Queen opened up Draper's Academy at Harold Hill, and I popped down to take a picture. And normally I don't go out the studio that much, but I did really want to get a shot of the Queen. And she visited Romford, if you remember, in Romford Marketplace some years ago. And I tried then to get a shot, and I just couldn't get close enough, couldn't get the right angle. And on this day, I went down to Harold Hill, and it was pouring down the rain. It was midweek, there wasn't many people there. And she come out of the car, the Bentley, and walked to the side. And again, I couldn't get the shot. But I was determined to get this picture. I've had it in my mind for years to get a good picture of the Queen. And then 2 hours later, she was coming back out. So at the studio, we've got something called polyblocks. And if you want to get higher, myself, to get a higher shot, or if people are a bit on the short side, don't lie, I put a few of the blocks down underneath their feet to build them up. So I knew the Queen was coming out in a couple of hours' time, so I went back to the studio and I thought I'll get some of these polyblocks to give me some height to get over the rest of the people. And that's what I did. And I tried to work out where the car would pull up and when she'd come out. I think if I stand here, I think I'll be in the right place. And I stood on my blocks, so I'm above everybody else. And she greeted a lot of children, and then she walked towards me, and towards me, and towards me, and she's about, say, our distance, 15, 20 foot. And I just went, Your Majesty! And she looked round, turned me like that, and then she turned me a bit like this, and I just brought the camera up, bang bang, 2 frames, and that's what we got. So that's now sent back to Buckingham Palace, waiting for the reply back on headed paper, but pleased with the shot. But again, persistence and determination. It was a cold day, it was freezing cold, it was raining, but I was determined to get that shot. And again, that's one for the studio, and with perseverance we managed to get it. So, how we do it? Okay, so effectively, how do we get the work in? So there's no real one way that we get the work in, but we work with a lot of schools. The James Oglethorpe, Hall Mead, Cooper's, the Havering Music School. And what we do, if they've got any fundraising events, so if they've got any Christmas fetes or summer fetes, we'll go and support them. But we'll also do something where we send a letter out. For example, we did this with the Havering Music School, and we sent a letter out to all of the parents of the children that went to the music school. We said, look, if you donate just £10 towards the music school, what we'll do for you is a family portrait session at the studio and a 10x8 picture. And it works. It's always a numbers game, because we sent out about 350 letters. We got about 16 replies back, so they made £160. And we made 16 good clients. Very nice people, and it worked very well. And we do the same with Cooper's, Hall Mead, and James Oglethorpe. And there's many other schools that we're always looking for. So if you know any contacts at the school, get Carter. The other thing we do is charity checks. We did a deal with Marks and Spencer some years ago, and we was in 3 branches of Marks and Spencer's with an exhibition stand. Waitrose and Sainsbury's and Tesco's we work a lot with. And what we do in return for them helping us, we help them. And if they're following a charity and they're trying to raise money, what we do is we write a cheque and give the cheque towards the charity, but we also take donations from people that want family pictures taken. So we take the donation in, we do a family picture for them. So it creates effectively a win-win-win. The supermarket is winning, the people that are coming down for the pictures are winning, and the charity is winning as well. And I'm a great believer that if you give, you get, rather than just take. And this was a charity cheque we did at Sainsbury's in Hornchurch, me handing it over. and this was for Parkinson's UK. And this lady came to me about 17 years ago for a portrait, and she was fine. And sadly, she has got Parkinson's, and she came to me again about a year or so ago, and we did some more pictures of her in the studio. Really nice person, and she said, James, I do a lot of fundraising. And I said, let's try and help you there. And I remember Sainsbury's was actually fundraising for Parkinson's at the time. And I said, let me have a word with them and see if we can work something out. And again, Sainsbury's were very good as well. They said, James, put a stand in, or whatever you can get donations, we'll pass it on to them. So it's a good idea of helping charities and also, you know, helping everybody. And testimonials and referrals. I teach a lot of other photographers this. And I was taught this years ago by an American businessman, a very clever guy. And he said, James, he said, if you're not getting referrals from your existing clients, it's the equivalent to burning £50 notes. They're quite a strong visual sort of thing. And what he did, he taught me the way to do it. And effectively, when people have been to the studio, we will ask for a testimonial. And hopefully everybody's completely happy, and they've had a good time and had a laugh with a bit of humour. And then we also say, if you could recommend 2 or 3 people that you think may be interested, we will give them a shoot and a 10 by 8 picture as well. Now we all say 2 or 3, it's a bit like alternative choice. Do you prefer this one or that one? Do you like tea or coffee? And in business it works very well, especially in the photography business. And generally we get 2 or 3 referrals, but we get about 20 referrals a week. I give these people a call, and not everybody's interested, but a lot of the people are, and it brings in like-minded people. And this could be used in any business. So I teach this to photographers, but effectively, if you was an electrician or a mechanic or a painter and decorator, if you just ask in a nice way, is there anybody else you know is interested, it stops all the advertising costs, because you've got a name and a number on a piece of paper. And this works great for the photography business. The previous customers, as I say now, we've got 15,000 previous customers, and we go back to the customers regularly, and we send a £100 voucher, and with that £100 they can come back to the studio and buy whatever they like. And again, it's good to see customers. Sometimes it's 5-6 years, sometimes it's 20 years, and they say, James, you haven't changed a bit. Much. But it really does work well going back to the previous customers that we've got. So what have we done now? Obviously the market's changed drastically. We're in a luxury market business, and we've been hit hard, and portrait photographers have been hit very hard, because when the money's there, £500 on a picture, it's quite expensive, but we'll have it because we can afford it. As soon as the recession started to bite, customer after customer would walk in the studio and say, James, before you start, we've got no money to spend. I know you're giving a free print, we'll just take the free print and that's it. Not great for business. So I had about 15 staff when times were good, shall we say, and a lot of them were part-time, full-time, and I had to move with the market. So I've streamlined the business, I've brought it down, and unfortunately there has been some redundancies, and I've scaled it down. But now, instead of doing 20, 30 jobs a week, I'm doing more like 10 jobs a week. I've got Beatrice, my partner, is a brilliant help to me, and another girl that helps me part-time. So we're managing to keep going. Although we're not doing the big figures, we haven't got the big overheads, so it's working. So effectively I've moved with the market. And now training. What I've managed to do now is I train a lot of other photographers. It's mainly on the sales and marketing. I do also training days with just photography. But a lot of the things I keep getting asked back more and more is the techniques with the actual marketing and selling. Now I was asked to do a talk in Yorkshire, and we went up in January, myself and Beatrice, and we went up there and we did the talk to about 40 people. So now every year I'm doing about 4 or 5 talks a year, and I'm doing training talks as well, just for other photographers. So the same as me when I was starting off, I went to see them talk at seminars. Now I'm teaching other people as they're starting as well, which it does help, and it helps me a lot within my business. So the HAD, if you've heard of this, the Haven Association for Disabled, yeah, very good cause. and they're Wendell Tye Lane, and effectively it's just over the road to the studio where I am. And they said, James, can you help us out with some fundraising? I said, of course. I said, let's try and put something together. And we did. This is actual, you know, the hut just by the car park there. They meet in there a few days a week. And again, what we do is at the Havering show, we collect donations, and for a couple of £1 donation, we'll give a family portrait session and a print. And our target is to raise £1,000 for them. I've raised at the moment £800, so we're about 200 shy, and we know we're going to get this. It's just a matter of time. And they're very pleased, because every so often when we have a good day charity fundraising, I'll just run over the road and say, there's another £50. He said, thanks James, just keep them coming. So it really does work. So what I'm actually doing tonight as well is that we're saying, if you was willing just to put in a £5 donation for HAD, I will give yourselves a family portrait voucher, which is for a shoot and a print as well. Or if you've got children, grandchildren that may be interested in those fairy pictures, we do the same thing for you as well. We do the fairy shoot, which we've got coming up at the end of the month, the 29th, and we'll give you a free print as well. So if you could dig deep, I'd really appreciate it. And we're trying to push that money up to raise that £1,000 for HAD. So I think that then brings me more or less to a close. I've got a small show which is on a video, which is just a compilation of a few pictures which I'll show you, and then we're at a close. Enjoy more tea and coffee. Thanks very much, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Any questions? First one, Suresh.
Thank you, Mr. President. James, you have done a very good job over the years. My congratulations to you. I started photography when I had a baby daughter.
Yeah.
That was many years ago. I still do photography, but not like you. When you were started the photography, who was doing your printing? Were you doing the printing?
No, it's a good question. I went to a printer in Ingatestone, and rather than buying all the equipment, I went to a printer and he just specialised in that. So effectively, I just concentrated purely on the photography and took all my negatives and printing straight to one printer. And I stayed with him probably for about 12 years. And then he retired, and now we have another lab that we use, and we stick with the same lab all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Question myself or someone else is thinking of one. We had a lecturer on art, sorry, a speaker on art the other day, and what is art, of course, came up. What makes a good picture, James?
What makes a good picture? Well, when I'm teaching other photographers, there's three main things that you've got to get right on a portrait and a photograph. And the number one thing is the expression. I'll get everybody to write that down. And the number two thing is the expression. And the number three thing is the expression. Because if the expression is really good, it will sell the picture. The thing is though, if you get everything correct, so in other words, if you get the composition good, and if you get the lighting good, and you get the expression good, it really sells the picture. But what makes the best picture is definitely that, the expression.
So it is a bit like art then.
It's very much like art. And the same as what I was saying about the dog picture, you know, the fifth one along that come up, it's the rules of art where they line the picture in the third. So effectively, the photography come from originally art, just that it's doing it on film in a box rather than painting it. So the principles are still there. Yeah.
One over there, have a go up. Natalie.
I was just going to say, I have 4 fairy mad grandchildren. I assume that they've got to give off a 20 quid donation.
I've got the vouchers here. If you've got the £20, I've got the 4 vouchers.
I've got a man over there who might have the 20 pounds.
Well done, Michael.
Take them, pay me later. Thanks very much.
Ron.
With all the hundreds of weddings, can you remember one that might have been an absolute disaster?
Well, actually, hand on heart, when you say disaster, you mean
A funny disaster.
a funny disaster. Well, I must say that the difficulty is when it was shot on film, as it was shot on film, is that it was always a worry because you had the film and you took the pictures and you checked the camera before and afterwards, and then I used to take my films again to this printer, and effectively you're giving him total control. And I can honestly say that out of the 500 weddings, that they was all okay. I did see some disasters, not funny disasters, but disasters where they used to bring the films and negatives out of the tank, and you knew straight away if all was okay, because you could tell by looking at the negatives, even from a distance, if it's exposed right. And I saw some come out, what they would call cooked, and they're totally blank. So that was always a worry, okay? But there's always things that were happening and things that happened, how can we say, that made it a bit tricky and more difficult. And when you say funny disaster, there was things like, there was one wedding that I did at St Andrews, and I think it was the groom fell over. It wasn't funny, but he fell over and cut his nose. And the bride arrived really late in the day. And then myself, everything was going wrone with the day. Not drastically, but it was going wrong. And I was just about to go to reception. I was putting all my cameras in the boot. And just as I was doing it, a guy came, he said, excuse me, he said, do you know the way to reception? I said, yeah, you've got to drive down there, turn right and turn left. He said, oh, thanks. And I just shut the boot down like that, and as I did it, keys. And I left the keys to the car in the boot, and everything on that wedding, from the groom falling over to her getting there late and me putting the keys in, and it actually got into the Rockford recorder. And she said the photographer locked his keys, and luckily they didn't say my name. But there was always a few fun. The register one was a great one. There's one quick story which I'll just share with you, that at St Andrew's Church, I don't know if you're familiar with the church, but it's got the altar and the stairs are set back about 20 foot away. And they used to do a lot of weddings at St Andrew's. And the vicar every week would say to the couple, he'd say, if I can come over here, they would be kneeling there, and he'd say to them every week, after the blessing, if you'd just like to stand up and follow me. And he'd turn around and walk up to the altar and do the final part of the ceremony. Well, this point, he said once to the bride and groom, and they were kneeling down, and I'll give you this for instance, there was the groom there and the bride there, and he said to them, just follow me, and turn round. Instead of saying, just stand up and follow me. So they were there, and they were packed church and everything else, and the groom was there, and as he said that, the groom started to move. Like this. And there's the bride next to him, she said, oh well, I'll do that to him. Like that. And by that time, the vicar's there, and he said, and they did 20 foot on the knees all the way up. And because once it started, they finished. So there's some good funny stories, if you know what I mean. And luckily no bad disasters. So it was good. So,
Yes, James.
yes.
I had a friend who done portrait photography. He used to take photographs of black people when they died. Apparently it was a family tradition to have a picture of the deceased, and he made a lot of money out of it. Have you ever done anything like that?
I must admit I haven't. I had heard of it, and I have been asked to photograph
You have?
some funerals. It's not my sort of thing, really. I've heard of it, and it is quite a niche sort of thing, but also as well, a lot of cultures would like it videoed. And only about 2 weeks ago, I don't do video photography, but I've got a good friend I recommend, and the phone call come through, we've got a funeral, could you video the funeral? And I did pass the number on. I've heard of it, I haven't done it, to be honest.
And what do you think is the best portrait camera?
The best portrait camera now is either Canon or Nikon. And really what it is, Nikon always used to make the best lenses. So Canon will bring out the next camera and Nikon will bring out the next one a little bit better. But normally now they're the two main players, Canon and Nikon. Definitely. Thank you. It's an interesting point. Yeah.
Any other questions? Jim?
Yeah, leading on from what Mike has just said, how long does your equipment last? If you buy a camera, how long would you expect that to last?
Well, it used to be that the cameras that we used to use were roll film cameras, 120 roll film, and they used to last years because they'd wear out. And obviously, you know, in the trade they're called hammered, you hammered it, because you might be doing at least 100 shots, 120 shots on a wedding, and you might be doing 2 or 3 of those a week, so they're getting used very hard. But the old cameras, you used to have a camera repair man. I used to use a guy at Rayleigh, and he was constantly repairing a camera for me. So I might have about 4 cameras. I'd always take 3 with me to the weddings, 3 flash guns, 3 of everything, just in case. And you would get repaired, but now, not so much. Now, effectively, it's become like cookers and fridges. Effectively, they've become like white goods where you throw them away. So it really is down to how much usage. But when I was very busy at the studio, we was doing sometimes 30, 40 sessions a week. I would constantly have a camera in for repair. Or what we tend to do now is lease the cameras. So we don't buy them, we'll lease them for a period of about a year or 2 years. And at that end of that period, they're worthless, effectively. Can't get much for them second hand. The lease company more or less give them back to you, and you take out a new lease and buy, or lease a new camera, should we say. So about a year, 2 years.
Any other questions? Question over there? Well, James, calls upon me to give a vote of thanks. And
Thank you very much.
It's a real pleasure to give a vote of thanks to a Hornchurch businessman who is really stayed put such an effort into it, made it work, and putting something back into the community. I don't think I can say any more than that. I'd just like all of us to show our appreciation in the usual way, please.
I'd just like to thank you all for your time and being such a great audience. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
They're the ones who took Andrews. Lizzie.